The room was hushed in the soft amber glow of a bedside lamp, and a quiet tension filled the space like a held breath. Emma sat on the edge of the bed, hands folded in her lap, her heart beating a rhythm as quick and uncertain as a bird's. Across from her, Daniel moved slowly, tugging off his tie and carefully hanging his jacket over the chair as though if he rushed, he might disturb this fragile new world they'd just stepped into. They had spent months planning their wedding day, choosing flowers, sampling cakes, writing their vows, but nothing had quite prepared them for this moment, their first night together as husband and wife. Emma glanced up through her lashes, wondering if he was as nervous as she was. Daniel caught her look and smiled gently, not one of those grand, rehearsed smiles they'd worn all evening for photos, but a small, reassuring one, laced with humor and kindness. "It feels a bit like we're strangers at a sleepover," he said with a light chuckle. She laughed too, the sound soft and genuine. The tension began to melt as they shared that first real laugh as a married couple. They weren't strangers, not really. They were simply two people learning to live together, learning to grow together one careful breath at a time. With that unspoken understanding, Daniel crossed the room and sat beside her. The mattress dipped under his weight, the subtle shift pulling them just a bit closer. There were still so many unknowns between them, so many futures left to discover. Yet tonight was the first step toward making those futures together. And in that shared glance, something unspoken passed between them, a promise that they didn't have to be perfect, only kind. Night deepened around them, and still they sat together, leaning back against the headboard, their hands twined loosely between them. Outside, the world was quiet, no distant horns, no hurried footsteps. Inside this small sanctuary, Emma felt safe enough to speak what was on her heart. "I was scared tonight," she whispered, voice trembling just a bit. "Not scared of you," she clarified quickly, squeezing his fingers, but scared of failing somehow, scared that this would all feel strange forever. Daniel shifted, turning toward her, his brow furrowing with concern. "You're not alone," he said softly. "I was scared too, scared that I wouldn't know how to do this right." That admission hung between them like a fragile truce. Emma felt a lump rise in her throat, not of fear, but of relief. It struck her then that they were both so human in this moment, both vulnerable in their expectations. And then, as though guided by some gentle impulse, Daniel spoke again, his voice quiet but steady. "When my mother was very sick," he began, "I learned how important it was to listen, just listen. It's not always about fixing everything, sometimes it's about showing up and being there." She listened, captivated by his honesty. They had known each other long enough to share favorite movies and places they wanted to travel, but this was different. This was deeper, richer. This was the beginning of knowing one another in a way that only years and patience could teach. And as he spoke, Emma's heart softened further, realizing that this first night wasn't about perfection. It was about honesty, about the kind of empathy that would hold them together when life wasn't easy. Somewhere after midnight, Daniel noticed that Emma's hands were chilly. Without a word, he reached over to a small travel bag and pulled out a cherished scarf, one that had belonged to his mother, one that he had kept close on nights he felt alone. It was his most comforting possession. "You're cold," he murmured as he draped it carefully around her shoulders. Surprised, Emma touched the soft fabric and looked at him. "Your mom's scarf," she said, recognizing it from a story he'd told her once. He nodded, his gaze tender. "I kept it close for years. It's always made me feel less lonely. But it's so special," she began, feeling the weight of his gesture. "That's why I want you to have it tonight," Daniel replied. "Because tonight is special too." That simple, selfless gift broke something open inside her. It wasn't grand, and it wasn't loud, but it was an act of pure kindness, an unspoken message that what was his was now hers too, that they would face every cold, uncertain moment together. She held the scarf close, feeling its softness against her cheek, feeling the warmth of him in the small space between them. Outside the window, a distant breeze rustled the trees as if echoing the gentle shift inside her heart. That small, tender gesture was more than a scarf. It was a profound offering of trust. a symbol of the kind of home they would build, one where generosity mattered more than grandeur, one where sharing was its own kind of strength. When morning began to lighten the curtains with a gentle wash of gold, they hadn't slept much, but they had talked more than they ever had before. Emma brushed a tear from her cheek as she realized just how vulnerable they had been with one another, confessing fears, sharing stories, offering kindnesses they hadn't known they had in them. "I never thought," she began softly, "that someone could make me feel so understood just by sitting here and listening." Daniel brushed her hair back and smiled, a kind, crinkled smile that held no expectation, only gratitude. "That's what this is, isn't it?" he replied, "being there, being kind, even when we're scared." And then gently he held her close. Nothing else needed to be said. The morning light warmed the room as they embraced, not as two strangers nervously navigating tradition, but as two human beings choosing compassion. Somehow, the worry of whether they would fit into the perfect mold of husband and wife had melted away. Instead, they had found something much deeper, a sense of safety built on mutual care. That was the heart of their first night together. Not perfection, not scripted romance, but an authentic meeting of hearts in the quiet dark. And as they held each other there, they knew that this simple, honest connection was exactly what would carry them through every sunrise that followed. When the first rays of morning sunlight fully filled the room, they rose together, hands still intertwined. The scarf was folded neatly at the foot of the bed, and the lamp was dimmed at last. As Emma opened the window, a cool breeze kissed her face, stirring a feeling of lightness she hadn't expected. Daniel stood behind her, his hands resting gently on her shoulders. The world outside was beginning to wake, birdsong lilting, leaves shimmering, and inside, a new chapter had already begun. This was their first morning as a married couple, but more importantly, it was the first morning they had truly seen one another. Every small kindness they had exchanged in the quiet of the night had left an imprint on their hearts, promising that they could face whatever the world might hold, as long as they held on to this spirit of compassion. "I thought this would feel unfamiliar," Emma said, her voice threaded with wonder, "but somehow it feels like home." Daniel pressed a kiss to the top of her head. "That's what happens," he answered simply, "when we choose each other, not because everything is easy, but because we want to give each other our best." And as they stood together at the window, hands clasped as naturally as if they had been meant to fit forever, they felt a quiet, profound peace. In one small night, they had built a bridge of understanding strong enough to last a lifetime, a heartfelt reminder that the most powerful moments often arrive wrapped in the gentlest of gestures. The light kept growing outside, and so did their hope. Together, they stepped into the day with hearts a little fuller, hands a little warmer, knowing that their story had only just begun and that every night to come would hold new chances to love, to listen, and to care.